Welcome to Growing Old. Soil versus hydro, the cons.
Well, the sun is rising on a brand new day in the backyard garden where we laugh and play. We got our special plants, oh, they don't need a name. Well, with every little leaf, they take away the pain. Growing old in a garden of dreams with friends and family.
So now let's look at our soil cons. First up, we have Flower Cup TV. I told you he did an excellent job. His first con is slower growth. Now he says less oxygen at the roots compared to the hydro system. Now that's because you're buried in your soil, but in that hydro you got your bubbler and everything running, so you're getting more oxygen. He says lower yield potential. He says generally smaller plants and buds than RDWC. Now I've read a lot about that and I've heard a lot about that. Now, and I've never grown hydroponically, but I've got some pretty big plants and some pretty high yields out here. His third thing is pests, and he says it's a higher risk of fungus gnats, mites, thrips, mold, organic or peat-based media. I mean, those are all issues. You just have to. I think you'll want to look at where do I get my soil, and are they a trusted supplier? His last con is less control. Now he says nutrient uptake is more buffered, and he says which can be a plus or a minus depending on your style. And I think what he's getting at there is, and like we've mentioned before in soil, it's kind of forgiving if I'm messing up on my newts going in. But at the same time, if I want to dial that stuff right in, the hydro world is where, you want to do that and you can get really, really dialed in. Vince, he says, I grow DWC and he's been doing it for 3 years. When he first started out, it was in soil, and he got all sorts of aphids, and he hates bugs. So he went to hydroponics, and now with DWC, you got to remember you got to pH your water, and it's got to be between 5.8 and 6.2. Roughly your ppms should be between 300 for seedlings and up to 900 if you're in veg and flower. I mean, that's some good information. I mean, I never knew that. I'd never known any of that. And he says you need a good air pump along with everything else. And in soil, you run such, lighting, exhaust fans, circulation fans. The big plus is faster growth, no pests, no mold to worry about. So, he's a big DWC man. But now let's look at some hydro cons. First, Flower Cup TV. Says more technical, requires more monitoring, of your pH, your water temperature. You want to keep that water temperature roughly between 65, 68 degrees. A chiller is required. He says warm water equals root rot. Chillers are often essential, he says, to RDWC. Expensive setup, higher upfront costs for gear and automation. And finally, he says the last one is unforgiving. Problems like root rot or pH drift can accelerate fast. Sleeps with Sativa says that on his first indoor grow, he used a recycling Foresight DWC equipped with CO2. He went completely overboard, thinking his first grow was going to be the best of the best. He had a water chiller. His system was hooked up to an environmental control system inside of a 4x4 tent with a big 600-watt light. He had 10 air stones, 3 pumps, 3 reservoirs. All that was the same size as the other 4 sites, put together. He spent so much money and burned so much electricity. He says weekly water changes, flushing the whole system out, refilling, checking the pH every couple of hours. It doesn't sound like he had a really good time, but I do know he could grow some big plants both indoors and out. Tenderfoot Grow, he says, man, a few years ago, he first tried to do the hydro. He failed miserably. It's hard to get let down, but you know what? You just got to get back up. You get it and you try again. Mr. Cybowski, another one is hydro takes power to run water and air pumps, chillers, and you got to use a pH meter. So, he's talking about mostly when you're talking about running all that equipment. Sauce 420, he says, I'm a fan of hydroponics, just not the cost of hydroponics. Bones does 6142. He says both are great, but hydroponics doesn't have to be hard, guys. He uses 2 bottles all the way through with the same mixture in 5-gallon bubble buckets, only watching his pH and ppm, growing big, healthy flower. He doesn't even need to adjust his pH with Luca's method. I've never heard of Luca's method. Maybe you could give us a little more information on that, but I'll have to look that up. There's no wrong way to cultivate your dreams. User says again, nutrient monitoring is not so hard if you do some basic things. For instance, always pH your water before mixing nutrient solutions. Now, the pros and cons, that was the pros and cons, but we have some other comments, and I felt they needed to be put out here because they're really good comments, and they've got some really good information in them. From Mary Mitchell, she says, in her experience with older strains, it's strain dependent. Each strain, it knows how it likes to grow. And she says, the best example, sour diesel. You only get that diesel skunky punch if it's through DWC. High and high hydro. He thinks that the hydro cons are no cons. He says that the setup is only as complex as you want it to be. A bucket with an air stone and a net pot is enough to start, and compared to an autopot system, the costs are nearly the same. And I'm thinking he's probably right, because some autopot systems can be, you can get into it pretty good. But he also mentions that nutrient monitoring is a pro, and it's easy as counting to 10. You should pH your solution in soil anyways. So, if you're using soil, you're pHing anyways. And you're measuring everything to be easy too. You read the numbers usually from 0 to 4, fill it with water, and your numbers, you just go till your number's as low as you want it to be. And he says that in German, they call that Malen nach Zahlen. And it says, related to books for kids, that means paint by numbers. He says it's more forgiving because, and here's where You know, before we were talking about in soil, you know, maybe I'm a little more forgiving, but at the same time, maybe it takes a little more time to find a problem. But he says it's more forgiving because it shows your mistake almost immediately instead of delaying it by 7 days. The most important thing is that you can react in minutes. You get the solution right, and once you get it right, you know, within 5 minutes, you can tell. Now, if you make a mistake in soil, he says you have a real problem because now, one, you don't find out about it till late, and two, now the only way I can fix it is I have to flush. So hope for the best. And he says most people are scared to fail on hydro because they don't even try, and not trying is failing on purpose, and you don't have to like it. I love this quote. I love that quote. I had to put it down. Loved it. Guyman 4016, he says DWC Coco are both a full-time job. Lots of babysitting. It's probably worth it if you need to grow bulk. He says he personally uses live soil, and he says that's the way to go. You know, he loves it with the autos. You know, he's impatient because he doesn't need 2-pound harvests. Galaxy Solutions, my brother here in Arizona, he says he grows in soil, never tried hydro or cocoa. You know, he says that hydro seems like a lot of work and cocoa seems the same. You know, I'm an old man, and I see his point. Always mixing newts and worrying about the pH. Yeah, but here, yeah, we don't worry about it, but thanks, brother. And my brother Vinny, he says he's seen beautiful plants grown in both soil and hydro. He's seen enormous ones in DWC, and he says that the DWC, he thinks it was a cleaner way to grow, and he said DWC, and he thought it was super smooth. He says no back burn. And he thought it was pretty high potency. He says the best he had ever tasted. Well, there you have the cons of soil and hydro. Now, please comment below if you think we left something off or if you have something to add. But thank you to all of our subscribers and viewers. We couldn't do it without you. We love your comments. Keep them coming. Much love.
Growing up.